And today we are going to introduce something new, and we are going to talk about a database. So in particular, we are going to talk about MySQL database and also SQL queries. Um, because in this course, we are going to discuss how to integrate several technologies, primarily PHP, SQL, and MySQL. A solid understanding of each is important before you begin writing PHP scripts that use SQL. SQL is actually structured query language, which is used to create, like, do all kind of things in a database. And primarily, we are going to for with PHP, we usually use MySQL. So to understand how to write PHP scripts that use a structured query language to interact with MySQL database. So for now, we are departing from the temporarily we are leaving the discussion on PHP and to delve into MySQL. And many of you probably already know that MySQL is the world's most popular open source database application. So today we are going to familiarize ourselves with MySQL client and some very basic database building technique in MySQL application. And we are going to talk a little bit about very basic structured query language, that means SQL queries. So we are going to use SQL to create queries, to create very small databases in using MySQL applications. Okay, so these are the learning outcomes for today. Uh, we will learn uh, how to actually uh, name different database elements, how to create databases with multiple columns, how to put appropriate names for each of the columns, what kind of data type will be in the database, some column properties, and we'll also learn uh, how to access MySQL database using MySQL clients and PHP admin client. Okay, so first of all, naming the database elements. Uh, Try to remember that once any database element, it might be the database name, it might be the table name, or any other thing. If you want to name something yourself, that name can contain only letter, numbers, and underscore. You cannot put special characters. Also, structured query language or SQL has a bunch of keywords, existing keywords. The keywords are like, suppose, uh, in other programming languages you have seen there is like for, while, main. These words are like these are like existing keywords. So your names cannot match those existing names. And whatever name you put as database elements, you have to treat them as case sensitive, shorter than 64 characters, and unique within its realm. That means within the database and or table. That means don't repeat them. If you want to put like the same name for two different tables, those two tables have to be in different databases. You cannot just put them in the same database. So within the same realm, they have to be unique. Okay, so let's start by familiarizing ourselves with MySQL client. So MySQL client, the client that you are going to use to create MySQL database. So already you have installed XAMPP on your machines, and you can actually run the MySQL server from XAMPP Explore control panel. So I'm starting it here. So now MySQL server is running on my local machine, and from the command prompt, I'm using the Windows machine. So from the command prompt, okay, let's go here. So XAMPP, then PHP, myadmin. Then inside that we have this. Okay, let's see where the location for the client is. So the client is located. Okay, XAMPP, then MySQL, then bin. Okay, so I'm in the wrong place. So it's not here. Okay, so I am inside where the client application is. So the client application here is mysql.exe. Okay, so since I am on my own machine, I that means the server is running on my own machine and I have the root privilege, so I don't have any password. I can uh, access the client without the password, but you can actually set your password. Anyways, my username would be root, and in that case, since I am on my own machine, I don't need a password. So, okay, now, now I am actually running, um, yeah, now I'm running the client. So now I can actually use different SQL queries to whatever I want to do. I can create new database, and inside that database I can create tables. Okay, before that, let's look at we can the other way that we can access the MySQL client. So this is through the command prompt. The other way is let's do from here. I can do from localhost inside that myadmin. PHP myadmin. If I do this, this is actually written in PHP, but this will show you the interface for MySQL. That is MySQL server. Oh, okay. So I have to run the PHP because this is written in PHP. So I have to run the PHP server. So this is the alternative way to do the visualization. So whatever action you can actually do here can also be done here. So I can run everything or do all kind of stuff in MySQL client through the command prompt, or I can uh, do it through the interface through localhost PHP myadmin. Okay, for that you have to have both your PHP server and MySQL server running. Okay, so here you can add new database. Okay, I'll show you everything. So let's do this thing. Let's look at some examples, and then So if you look at the examples here, let's create a new database. So I am showing you through some examples available online. Let's start with this example. So yeah, let's start from here. So the SQL query to create a new database. So already in my server, you see I have a number of databases. So this one will show you the number of the databases that are already existing running in my server. So these are the existing databases in my server, but I'm going to create a new one. So for that one, let's do this thing. So let's just follow whatever is here. So I'm creating a new database. Let's name it Southwind. So if you remember, um, when I am actually choosing a database name, I have to make sure that this is not a SQL language keyword. For example, create is a SQL language keyword, right? Database is a SQL language keyword. Eventually, you will actually get familiar with all kind of keywords. You cannot actually name your database with those keywords. So I cannot actually create a database which name is create, right? Or I cannot create a database which has a name of as database because these are the keywords. So Southwind, I am just using it. It's not any keyword in SQL language. So by executing this SQL query, I am expecting to create a new database in my local server. Okay, so query OK, one row affected. So let's try to visualize if a new database had been created. So if I refresh it, yeah, now you see that a new database, Southwind, has been created. But okay, so these database can contain like many things, multiple tables, but currently this database doesn't have anything. So it's empty. There is nothing in the we just created the database, but there is no data table in it. Okay, so this is a command to create the database. Create database Southwind. Now, before we actually proceed, let's do this thing. Let's delete the dot database. Try to delete the database. So the SQL command to delete a database is drop. Okay, so my database is hopefully deleted. If I refresh here in the interface through phpMyAdmin, now you see it's gone. Okay, yep, it's gone. So next, when I'm creating, a better way to create is using these command. So create database and then if not exists. So this will make sure that you already don't have a database named Southwind. Okay, if there is already a database with the same name, it won't create anything. You can also do that when you are actually deleting the database. Drop database and then add these keywords if exists. Okay, so I already know that I don't have anything, so I'm just using the same keyword to create the database again. Yes, so I'm creating the database again. So I have the database again. So I created it, create database Southwind, then I deleted it by using the SQL command drop database Southwind. and then I created it again. Okay, and then now if I want to see like what are all the databases that I have in my local server, the SQL command for that is show databases. You can see it here, right? So it will show you all the databases that you have in your database server. So here you can see the list of the databases, right? Information schema, Magnolia Food, C1. So this is basically this same list you're seeing by running the show databases command. Now I want to create or do operations inside the Southwind database. I have created the Southwind database, but you see that this database is now empty. So this database doesn't have anything. If I want to try to expand that, there is nothing. So let's add a new table to this database. But currently, I am actually inside my client. So before I start doing something in the database, what I have to do is I have to select the database, and the SQL command for that is use, and then you name the database Southwind, and you see now before it was showing none, now it's showing Southwind. That means you have now selected the Southwind database, and now you can actually do something, add something to your add something to the Southwind database. So let's see if we already have anything in it. Um, so to check if it has, to check the list of tables, the SQL command is show tables. And you see that it says empty set. That means this database, Southwind database, it doesn't have any tables in it, any data tables in it. Okay, now I want to create a new table. Okay, so the command, SQL command to create a new table, as you saw before, the SQL command to create a new database was create database. And now then I ran use database name command to select the database. And to create a new table now, what I have to do is I have to run create table query. So similarly, I can put like if not exists to make sure that the same name table is already not there. Okay, so just very roughly look at this query. Create table products. Now these things, like you see each line is comma separated. So we are going to create a table named products, which will have these columns: product ID, product code, name, quantity, price, primary key. Okay, so primary key is not the column. I will talk what primary key is. But the columns are, primary key is actually a keyword for SQL. We will talk what this actually is. So product ID, product code, name, quantity, price. This products table is going to have these 5 columns. Just think about a Excel table, right? Your Excel table have multiple columns, and each column may have a name. And as you see, the product ID, it will be of type it will be some kind of number, right? So integer. So the product code would be some kind of some code. So it will be some consists of some characters. Suppose ABC or XYZ. This is the product code. So we are taking character types. The name of the product is also going to be a string, right? So we are using variable character varchar. I will talk in details about all of them. The quantity of the product, obviously that's going to be a number, right? So I will be taking int. The price might be uh, a real number, so it can have like, it might not be like a round figure. The price, as you see, if you go to the store, there is some dollars and some cents for each of the products. So the type of the price is decimal. Now there is some additional things to this, not null, auto increment. So I will actually talk about all of this, but for now, let's copy this and try to create this product, try to create this table. So just to remind you, we are working inside the Southwind database. How did we reach here? We ran this SQL query, use Southwind, to make sure that we are doing all the operations inside the Southwind database. And we then ran show tables SQL query, and this one returned empty set. That means so far there is nothing, there is no data table inside this database. Okay, now we are going to execute this SQL query, create table. Let's do one thing. Okay, if not exists, it's fine. Okay, sorry. To go back again, use south winds. South winds was the south wind. Okay, and then do this. Create table. If not exists is optional. You already know that we don't have anything in the database. Okay, so we executed this query. Now it says query okay. That means a table should have been created. Let's go through the interface to see if really a table has been created. Now you see inside Southwind, we have a table products. We click in products, and then if we click on the structure, now you see that this table has these columns: product ID, product code, name, quantity, price, right? And for each of them, we had mentioned what type of data we want for this column. So for product ID, we want integer type. So ID, product ID would be of some kind of number. Product code would be some kind of combination of characters. Uh, Name would be some string for which varchar is the keyword for that. Um, Quantity would be number of like how many, so that would be number. Price would be real numbers in decimals with decimals. Okay, and then we have some other things, some default values, uh, which we mentioned here, which was actually part of here. I will discuss about those. So you can see some of the columns, like price column had a default value in it. Quantity column has a default value of 0. Um, Name had a default value of empty. Product code had a default value of empty. Um, and product ID it didn't have any default value, but it has something extra, auto increment. Okay, so we'll talk about all of these, but for now, just see that we have created a new table, and this table has these columns along with what data type each column is going to have. Okay, so we created this table. Next, let's go to our slides. So we already showed how to uh, run the MySQL client and how to visualize it using PHP Uh, okay, we'll talk about the other things like, so we were running all our queries here, right, in the through the client, but we can actually do the same from the from PHP client as well. So I will actually show you all the examples in both here. I already have shown some examples through the client here, but I will also show you how to run queries here through the interface. But the recommended one is, like, I recommend to do it. Actually, it's up to you. The best is, like, if you're an expert, then try to do it from here. But at the beginning phases, you can do through the interface. Okay, so our columns had type, right? Each column had a type in it. So the way actually it worked is, you say create table, and then you put the table name, products, and then you put braces. Inside the braces, you have first you have the column name, and then you put the keywords, the column type, and then whatever you want, and then you put a comma. Once you put a comma, then it goes to the information for the next column. So similarly, you put the column name again and the properties of that column, and then you put a comma. Then you go to the next column. So this way you define each column. And finally, there is something called primary key. The product ID, which is the first column value, is the primary key. What a primary key is, I will actually discuss a little bit later. But as you see that the first column, that one was selected as primary key, so you can see a key sign, key symbol next to it in the PHP client. In the PHP uh, uh, web client. Okay, so we have created the table. Let's go to our. Okay, so just very broadly, the columns might be text, right? It might be numbers, it might be dates and times. So, or it can be like some special types, enum and set. For the text types, so exactly what kind of texts uh, we can mention. So first of all, see char. It is a fixed length form from 0 to 255 characters long. So I can actually, okay, for this example, here in this example, we had mentioned a length of 3. That means we said like maximum length of our product ID will be 3 characters, but I could have like up to 255. Okay, and then varchar, it has varchar means it has a like a variable length. I will discuss how this is variable. So suppose if you know that, suppose if you want to store your name, for here in this example, right? So the name of the product, the product code will be, you are limiting the product code. That means every product code will be of consist of 3 characters, but the name definitely won't be, the name length would be variable, right? So when you go to a store, different products have different names, and obviously they don't have like any specific name length, right? Some have shorter length names, some have longer length names. So by varchar, you're saying that these names will be of variable length, but you are taking like the maximum one would be of 30. So the maximum length is 30, but it will be something around like less than 30. So it might be 30, the name length might be even 10 characters or 15 characters. So it's variable. That's why you are using varchar. Okay, next, tiny text. Uh, it means a string of maximum 255 characters, or then you can select text, which can hold a string with a maximum length of 65,535 characters, and then medium text, which is even longer string, and finally long text, which has a like a very long, um, long lengthy string. But mostly you will end up using char or varchar. So the details for these are in your textbook. Please go through your textbook to read more in details. The difference between char and varchar is uh, char is like fixed length and varchar is variable length. Usually, uh, varchar actually takes less disk space because uh, you mentioned that, suppose for this example, right? You mentioned that maximum of your name length would be 30, but suppose your name for that product is only five characters long. So you will occupy only disk space there. Whereas if you say like char and you see three, even if something is less, still you will be occupying three bytes. Okay. Uh, so the char is best used for values that will always be a fixed length. Suppose for product code, all the product codes, although they are different products, may have the same length codes. But varchar, they are best used for values that will be of any length. Suppose for name, different people or different products have different names, so they will be of variable length. And these are the most commonly used two kind of texts. Um, and after that comes the numeric types. The numeric types are we already used int for the quantity, right? And then we use decimal for the price. So these are the two types, but there are other types. So suppose it starts with tiny int, which occupies 1 byte, and the range is minus 128 to 127. Similarly, int takes uh, it takes 4 bytes, and the range will be between something negative to something positive. But if you mention unsigned, in that case, everything will be positive and it will be doubled. Suppose for tiny int, if you don't say unsigned tiny int, then it will be minus 128 to 127. But if you mention that it's unsigned, in that case, it starts from 0 to 255. That means overall it has like 256 for 1 byte space. Similarly, if you look at our create table SQL query, here you see that for the first one, product ID, right? So we said int, and then we also use the unsigned keyword. It makes sure that the product ID it starts from 0 and then it goes, it's incremented. So the product ID can be between anything 0 to something, but it cannot be negative. That's why once I say unsigned, I make sure that it's not negative. Everything is going to be positive. Okay, so these int, float, double, decimal, these are the most commonly used type of numbers. So we talked about two types already. We talked about uh, texts. So text can be char, varchar, etc. We talked about numbers. Numbers can be int, double, decimal, etc. And then let's talk about date and time. So one of your columns might be in one of your columns you might be storing date. So um, suppose you are adding records to your table, and every time you are adding record, you want to keep the timestamp when the record is being added. In that case, you need a column which has of time of which has a type of time, right? For the date and time, there are different types: date, date time, timestamp, or just time. And they store value in this format. Date stores value in uh, this format. Date time stores value. It takes the date and the space and then hour, minute, second. And timestamp is like all together: first year, then month, then day, hour, minute, second. Okay. So this is the date type. Now, some other important column properties is length, um, and then null or not null, default, auto increment. So you see here we had used some of these here. So in all of the columns we said like not null, right? That means these column values cannot be null. Okay, so they can be null. So we cannot actually keep the just set a null value to any of those columns, because for all of them we have mentioned that they are not null. And then um, for the first column we put auto increment. Auto increment, by auto increment I mean that if the first row has a value of like 1,000, then if when I am going to add the second row, it will automatically add one to that. So that means the second row will have a product ID of 1,001. Third row would have a product ID of 1,002. So it will actually keep on incrementing based on previous row. Uh, then default is means that this column will have some default value. So for product code and name, the default value I set was empty, right? Something empty string. And for quantity, the default value was set to 0, and the price was default value was set to 9,000, like 99,999.99. Okay, so these are some additional important column properties. So once you define a column, you have to put overall what you need to do is you have to put the column name, and then what type of data that column is going to have. And then you have to mention like if you are going to allow negative value if it's a number, or just positive values if you are going to allow null values as the values of your column, uh, and if you want that column value to be auto incremented or have some default values, etc. Okay, I think if we once we actually keep on adding value to your table, it will be more clear. Then I will talk about primary key. I already mentioned, right? So this table had one primary key, and the primary key was selected. The first one, the product ID, that column was selected as primary key. Now, primary key is a very important concept. So, primary key, this key must always have a value. That means, in this case, your product ID must have an ID. You cannot just keep it empty. Each product must have a primary ID. Similarly, suppose from your command, if I ask you, like, if I want to create a table for the customers, right? What would be the primary key? His name. Another thing is the primary key has to be uh, unique for each record. And if it's a number, then If the primary key is a number, then it's almost always positive, not null integers. And if it's a number, then the best, very good practice is keeping auto incrementing, so that making sure that it doesn't repeat. So going back to that question, like if I have a like a table of customers, then what would be the primary key? You may think that the name of the customer might be the primary key, but that's not right, because two people can have same names, right? And that violates the condition for primary key. So in that case, each customer can have a customer ID, and that customer ID has to be unique, right? Suppose in our national ID cards or passport numbers, uh, these are unique numbers or unique codes. So if in the customer uh, table, if we put a something called customer ID, two customers cannot have the same customer ID. That can be the primary key, right? So in our example, the product ID is going to be the primary key. So obviously, in the products table, I'm going to add different product, right? Suppose this is for a shop or something. So I cannot have the same product ID for two different products, right? So the product ID would just appear once for for each of the products. Obviously, that's the primary key. So primary key is a very important concept for the database, for any database. Okay, so we had created our table. Now let's see what tables we have. If we had like multiple tables, it would have shown all the list of the tables, but for now we have only one table in Southwind database, and it will show you like products is the only table. Okay. And then if you, okay, next, um, let's learn how we can insert values into our table. So as you see here, we have our table, right? Uh, but this table doesn't have any value in it. Still, it doesn't have any value in it. So there is nothing in it. Okay, so to see that there is nothing in it, the SQL query, so select star means select everything. Star means everything. So select everything from products. As you see, if I want to run through this interface, I have to already I have selected the database Southwind, and then I have gone into the products. So basically, I am actually operating on this table. And now if I run this, you see there is nothing. So it's empty, right? Or I can run this here. Let's do it here. It's an empty set. There is nothing. Okay. So now you see that we can run this here, or I can run it here. Is the same. Okay, so let's insert something real. So the SQL command to insert into the table is insert into, then the table name, then you say values, that's the keyword, and then you start a brace and comma separated all the values. So the first one was product ID, right? Then product name, and then what was the third one? The third one was, sorry, product code. It was the product code. Okay, so the product code was like pen. And then the product name was pen red, quantity was 5,000, and the price was $1.23. Okay, so let's add the information about pen red. The pen red is a type of pen. It has a product ID of 1001. I am going to create an, basically I'm creating an inventory. So I am adding, like I'm saying, like I have 5,000 pieces of it, and this is the price. Okay, so let's run this. Okay, so basically I am adding one row of information into the products table. So remember, this is the query to do it. Insert into table name, which is products, values, and then inside the brace, I comma separated everything. Okay, I can insert multiple rows together. Okay, let's do this through the interface. I could do it using the client. I'm showing you that we can also do it here. So okay, it's okay. I can do it here. So it will add two more columns. So here to mention one thing, let's see what happens if I try to do this, because um, when I had actually when I had added the table, I said that the product ID cannot be null and it will be auto incremented. So the first product ID was added as 1001. Then I'm adding two more products, pen blue and pen black. But I'm trying to put null here. Let's see what happens. Okay, now I have inserted two more rows. Now let's see everything that is inside the products table. Select this star means everything from products. Now you see that I have three rows in the table, right? Previously, I didn't have anything. I added one row through the client here and two other rows through the interface here. And so the product ID, all of them have the product code of pen. They have but they're different products. They have different quantities, different prices. And the most important thing here is the first one had the product ID of 1001. The second one I just put null, but this one had two properties, right? First of all, it cannot be null, right? And the second one was it will auto increment based on the previous row. So the second row, when it got added, it just incremented based on the first one. So it became 1002. And then the third row became 1003. Okay. Next. Yep. So next I want to add this thing. So very carefully look at it. So insert into products, instead of directly adding values, what I did is I'm mentioning like what columns I am adding value to. So I say like product code, name, quantity, and price. I'm going to add these ones. What I'm omitting is I'm omitting product ID. So I'm not actually putting any product ID for this, as you see, right? But as you know that the product ID, it will actually get auto incremented, right? This is the primary key. So since I'm adding two new type of products, the expected behavior is the first one, pencil 2B, is going to have the product ID of 1004, right? And pencil 2H, this is going to have the product ID of 1005. So I'm not explicitly putting them. They will just populate it by auto incrementing the previous rows, right? Okay, so I'm doing this, and let's do the visualization from here. Let's go to SQL query and then run it from the interface. Okay, now you see I have like 5 rows of data. These 2 rows I didn't put any value for them, but they got auto incremented and they got values of 1004 and 1005. But to um, make sure that I am actually, since I'm putting 4 values, I had to mention like which 4 columns I'm populating. So after the products, I had inside the brace, I had named the column names, and then I put values. So I was explicitly mentioning that these columns are going to get the values from here. Okay. Okay, next, let's try to do this thing. Okay, insert into products. Okay, let's try to do this. Now you see that this time I'm going to add a new row, but the only thing is I am actually putting value for product code and name. So what's going to happen to the other fields for this row? So I am going to put only product code and name. Now you see for the quantity the default value should be 0, right? And then for the price the default value should be this, right? So these will get the default values. Product code I'm mentioning, and then this will get auto incremented. So I'm just mentioning that I'm going to put a product code and name, and let's see what I am seeing here. Into SQL. Yeah, now I have, as you see, I had only inserted this value and this value, right? But how did it get the other columns values? So the first one it got through auto incrementing. The fourth column quantity, it got the default value because I didn't mention anything. And the fifth one, price, this one got also the default value. Okay. Okay, that's it. And then finally, let's try to make an illegal operation. Illegal operation means insert into products, or let's try to do this thing one more time. But just let's make some changes here. Okay, now let's try to do this. Let's try to add a product which has a null as its name. Now we should expect, let's see what we should expect. Okay. Yes. So you see this one failed with an error. It says column name cannot be null. As you see, we tried to put values for the 2 columns, product code and name, right? Product ID, we knew it's going to be auto incremented. So it was going to be like 1007. Product name was like, product code was PEC, that's fine. Quantity was going to be 0, which is default value. Price was going to be the default. But the name, we tried to put null as the name. but that cannot that cannot be true because we put a condition on the name, right? It cannot be null. We said not null, so the name cannot be null. So this one failed, right? So this operation failed, and still we have, if we check the table again, select star from products. If we run the SQL query, you will find that still we have like 6. We tried to add the 7th row and it failed. Okay, because we tried to put null as name, which is a violation of the condition when we created the table. Final thing that I am going to do is I'm going to delete one column. So let's do this thing. Delete from products where product ID is 1006. 1000, let's do it. Okay, let's run it. Okay, let's run it from here. We can do it here, and okay, so let's delete from product where product ID is, let's say, 1004. Okay, since I am deleting, so there is some extra caution, right? Because we cannot actually, so before deleting something, just this pops up to make sure that you are actually doing it. Okay, so I deleted it. Let's see what happens. What's now in the table, in the products table. Now you see that I have 1000, the product ID with 1004 is gone. Okay. Okay, so for now, that's all for today. Let's recap what we learned. We learned about some very basic things. We learned how to run the PHP, MySQL client from command prompt. It's already MySQL client already comes when we install the XAMPP, and then we learned how to um, do like see or visualize all the table databases um, through an interface which is written in PHP, uh, and the address is like localhost PHP myadmin. We have to run the make sure that both the PHP server and the MySQL server is running, and then this will appear. Okay, then we learned how to add database, right? We learned how to go into that database. So adding database was create database. Going into that database was use database name, and then we learned how to create table. That one was we learned how to delete the database. That was drop database, right? We learned how to create a table in the database. First, we had to go to the database using use, right? So we went into the database using use, and then we created table, create table with the table name, and then we mentioned like the column names, the conditions, what type of data each column is going to have, the conditions for each column, right? Auto increment, not null, unsigned, okay? And then we checked the database, select star means all from the table name. Initially it was empty. Then we use the SQL query, insert into table name values, and inside the brace we put like values for different columns. This way we kept on adding. We learned different ways to uh, add rows to your table. Okay, and then we saw how something a query may fail because it may violate your condition. And finally, we learned how to delete a row from your table, right? Okay. So these are the so overall we learned some very basic SQL queries, which is create, select, and then drop, and then delete. Okay, so as per your textbook, this is in, all these are in chapter 4, but chapter 4 doesn't have the SQL queries. I showed you some simple SQL queries. The details of the SQL queries are in chapter 5. But for this exam, we are not going to ask you the details. The only SQL queries that are included for the syllabus are the ones that I discussed today. So next, I already announced the exam date, and the exam would be on that specific date, and I think I also gave you the time. For this exam, you will have like multiple choices, fill in the blanks, true, false, and small chunks of, you have to write PHP snippets, and some very simple SQL queries. So hopefully you will prepare very well for the exam. Best of luck, and thanks for joining the session today.